I am frequently asked by artists, and this video will apply mostly to artists that are relatively new to the marketplace, that they're trying to figure out where they fit into the overall picture of how the market runs and if their work is worth anything. Artists are, generally speaking, a rather intimidated lot because this showing your artwork in public is a lot like taking your pants off in public. That you're exposing yourself in ways that you're not accustomed to, in ways that may be very uncomfortable. But if you're ever going to show your work, and if you expect to prosper in the way that you are called to prosper, then exposing is just simply part of the deal. You're going to have to get used to the fact that the general public is going to take a look at your work and they are going to judge your work one way or the other. So we get to the point where artists ask me most frequently is, what is my art worth? And this can be a tricky proposition because a lot of times artists are simply asking the wrong question. And it's not so much what is my art worth, should be what is my time worth. If you're going to be spending a significant portion of your day creating artwork, doing the things that you enjoy doing, you know, sort of standing up to the establishment, so to speak, then it becomes an issue about, am I going to allow someone else to tell me what my art is worth? Or am I going to come in with a good idea and a good, I might add, reasonable idea that the work of my hands is worth something? And how I determine that is going to really depend on how much time am I willing to put into it. When I first began into making a living as an artist, this was back in 19, probably in the mid to late 80s, I guess. I asked the same question, and I had a hard time discerning what is really the answer. Mainly because I didn't have really a market established. I didn't have customers built in. I didn't have an idea because I'd never made any prior. I say never, I had made some sales, but nothing that I would call a living. And I had to sit down and think about really how do I price my work? If I go to a buyer, whether it's a gallery or whether it's a private buyer or whatever, and I ask them if they would be interested in buying one of my paintings, first thing they're going to ask is, how much do you want for it? That is, if they're interested. And so I began the same quest that I know many of you out there, if you're an artist, that you're on, is how in the world am I going to find the right price level, if there is such a thing, for my paintings? And this gets back to the point of, instead of asking about what is my art worth, how about asking what is my time worth? And I'll tell you why. Your time is going to be spent somewhere doing something if you want to make a living. If you want to make enough money to pay the rent, so to speak, then you know that your bills every month come to X number of dollars. It could be at the time in the late 1970s or I think it was 1980s when I was actually trying to figure out how to do all of this. My monthly expenses came to about $1,200. Now, you have to bear in mind that was a long, long time ago. But $1,200 would cover just about all of my expenses. And so I set $1,200 as the benchmark income number that I would seek to produce every month with the work of my hands. Now, here's where a couple of tricky things come in. Where you're going to be working for somebody doing something for some kind of wage. These days, when you go look for a job, I don't care if it's slinging burgers at Burger King or if you're looking to become the CEO of Pepsi Corp. It doesn't matter. The general marketplace sets the tone of what it is, whatever it is that you're worth. McDonald's may say, okay, we're willing to pay you these days $15 an hour. Back when I was trying to answer these questions myself, you were lucky to make $15 an hour. Back then, I worked for $7.50. I started off at $7.25 an hour working in construction, building houses. And that's how I made my daily wage, is how I fed my family and paid the bills. And I was raising 3 teenagers, 2 dogs, and a cat. I had a mortgage, and I had 2 cars and all the insurance and all the extras that went with it. So there was a lot to pay for based on an income of $7.25 an hour. But we made it work. My wife did work sometimes, but I never felt comfortable with having her work, so I eventually told her to stop working, quit her job, which she did, and I began supporting my family based solely on the work of my hands. And like I said, at the time I was working in construction, I learned how to build houses, and I could build a house. I was a good, fast learner. I learned what the carpentry trade is all about. I learned a lot about what your labor is worth. And one thing that I learned is something that we observed over and over and over again in the job marketplace is that there's people that stand around pointing at a ditch, and there's only one guy that's actually in the ditch, digging the ditch. So the one guy that's doing all the work, he's making $7, $8 an hour. Back in those days, he was making $7 or $8 digging a ditch. And the guys, there was usually like 3 or 4 guys standing around pointing and one guy working. And I never could quite figure that out. Why was there only one guy working and everybody else just standing around pointing? Well, obviously it's because, they're supervisors and blah, 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 and all that hype. Well, that's a crock when you get right down to it. The guy that's sitting around doing all the work could be making the money. But the one inconsistency in the job market is that the guy that does all the work is the one that gets paid the least. And the people that stand around doing the pointing, they're the ones that get paid the most. So there it is. And you're standing around, and these people are all pointing, and the guy's in the ditch, and he's digging his ditch. And the people that are standing around pointing, they're the ones that are making all the money. The great thing about being an artist is that you don't have people standing around telling you what to do, and they don't stand around and try to pay you what they think that you're worth. It's you're the one that is standing around, and you're the one that is digging the artistic ditch, so to speak. You're the one that is setting the standard, and you're the one that is going to either be successful based on what you truly believe that you can make and what your art is worth, that when it comes down to you digging your own artistic ditch, then you're going to be there dictating to others what your work is really worth. And that all boils down to what is your time worth. And that is the point of this video. What is an artist's time worth? Well, an artist's time is worth what people say it is. Bad attitude, alert. No, it does not boil down to that kind of thing. The real deal is that artists have value. There would not be a market if people did not demand the services of people that can create beauty or statements, even political statements in these days and age, and have something that they've created that is worth money that they're willing to pay for it out of their pocket. This boggles the mind of artists, especially when you're starting out. You're saying, my goodness, how do I know? Well, you know by the way that people react to your work. If you do good work, and I'm not going to push a foot around this issue, you must be able to do good work. If your work is going to be worth anything, you have to remember that you are going to be in competition with every other artist that is also trying to produce work that is worth something, that they can make a living off it in the marketplace. So you're up against this situation. Now, if you are an artist, the chances are that somewhere along the line you have sold something. Maybe not anything really great, maybe something that brought just a few dollars, but you should, let's put it that way, you should be in a position where you can say, okay, I've sold 2, 3 paintings, 50 paintings, 100 paintings, doesn't matter, but you judge the reaction of what people are saying about your work and how they think about your work by are they willing to sit down and write a check for it? And that's really the bottom line. When you want to make a living as an artist, what is somebody willing to write a check for it? And if the answer is that this gentleman comes along and he sees my work of art and I show it to him, usually privately, this is somebody that I know, a relative maybe, or somebody, and they say, wow, that's really good. And you say, well, what you willing to pay for it? And what do you want for it? You say, well, I'm, I'm $50. I'd like to have $50 for this. Now, if the guy sits down, yeah, I'll pay $50 for it. Then you know you've underpriced your work. The guy is sitting there. You're doing a little do-si-do with somebody that is interested in buying your work. And he comes in and he stands in a room and he looks around at a lot of things you may have for sale. And he's going to stop at one thing. And usually I've seen this 1,000 times. I know that it happens. Is that buyers will come into a room that has your work in it, whether it's your home room or whether it is, a gallery or whatever the situation is. Buyers will come in and they'll stand in the middle of the room and they'll start looking around. And what will happen is that guy will stop in front of one of your works of art, and he'll hesitate for just a little bit longer than he did for the other works of art. And you begin to say to yourself, this guy must be interested in that work. He said he circled around the table a couple of times and he came back and he took another look. Oh, I wonder this guy be a buyer for my work. So you swallow real good. You go up to the guy and you say, hi, I'm the artist that did this work. I see that you're interested in this work. And he'll say, yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. You tell him a little bit about it, where your studio is, a little bit about yourself, whatever. Don't make the mistake of spending your whole time explaining about what an artwork is. Two reasons. One, it'll make him feel stupid. And the second one is that he'll get bored with it. And after you finish telling him all the stories and go through the bio and all that stuff, he'll walk off and say, thank you very much. That was very interesting. And you'll end up with no sale. And we don't want that. We want to make a sale. We want to go pay the light bill. So let me tell you a story. When I had an art gallery in Tampa, Florida, and this was in the mid 1970s, we had just moved to Tampa, and I made a friend. His name was Nat Abel. He was an old, very successful Jewish gentleman who was retired from the ladies' ready-to-wear business. He owned 3 dress shops in both Lakeland, Florida and Tampa, Florida area. Anyway, old Nat Abel, he and I became friends because my gallery was right next to Merrill Lynch, the stockbrokers, and he'd come in and check his stocks and we'd talk, and he liked my coffee, and so we would sit there and drink coffee together, just have fun and talk. Well, he was with me one day, old Nat was, and a gentleman walked in, and I told Nat, I said, excuse me, let me attend to this gentleman. He said, fine. So this man came in and he did exactly what I'm telling you. He was looking around the gallery and there was a work of art hanging on the wall. He stopped in front of that work of art and he stared at that thing for a long time. And I made the mistake that I'm trying to help you to avoid. And I said, hey, this is a nice work of art. He said, yeah, I really like that. And so I told him about the artist and I told him about the technique and I told him about the title and how I got his title and all this kind of stuff. Oh, I was so knowledgeable, full of all this knowledge about the history of this work of art and how it came to be and who the artist was, blah, 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 all this stuff. And at the end, he said, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. And he walked out of the gallery. And boy, old Nat Abel, he was sitting there watching all of this. And old Nat Abel, he read me the riot act. He said, what in the world are you doing? I said, excuse me? He said, why didn't you sell this guy? He was interested, he wanted to buy their work of art. Why didn't you sell it to him? And I said, well, I told him everything about it and he walked off and that was it. He said, use your brain. He was He used to get on me all the time. He was the best mentor I ever had. He said, use your brain. He said he wanted to buy it and you refused to sell it to him because you spent all your time telling him about the artwork and the artist and the bio and all this crap. And he wasn't really interested in that. He wanted to buy something for his home and you wouldn't sell it to him. And if I was him, I would have walked off too. And I went, He said, if you ever see that guy again, grab him and tell him you'll sell it if he will write the check. I said, excuse me? He said, there is a price that that man would have written a check for right there on the spot if you'd have simply asked for it. But you didn't ask for it. And you should be ashamed of yourself for not asking for a check. Boy, I tell you, I mean, he was really mad at me. You know? I love old man Abel. Like he's my brother, you know, he was a mentor. Like, but I told him that I see your point. I told him the next time if somebody was interested, I will ask him to write the check. It just so happened that same day, that same man was walking through the lobby of the First Financial Tower where my gallery was. And I saw him on my having these big glass windows, so I mean I could see out what was going on in the lobby, and I saw him walking out. He was obviously leaving the building. Man, I jumped out of my seat and I ran over and I grabbed him by the arm and he went like this, you know, and he said, what's going on? I said, forgive me if I started you. I didn't mean to startle you. I said, but I'm Gail Tate and I operate this gallery over here. And you showed an interest in a work of art. And would you just give me 2 minutes of your time? That's all I'm asking for. And he looked around. He didn't know what to make of me, you know. But he said, okay, I'll give you a couple minutes, you know. I mean, he was leaving the building, but apparently he wasn't in much of a hurry. So we went out and I took him by the hand. I mean, I don't know what he thought of me, but I literally grabbed him by the hand and I walked him over into my gallery and we stopped right in front of that. Um, it was an artwork by Ilya Bolotowski. He's a constructionist, a lot of modern abstract thing. I said, when you came in this morning, I know that you were interested in this work of art. Now, was I wrong? If so, I'll just let you go and we'll be on our way. He said, no, you're right. I was interested. And I said, I have a price tag on it. Tell me what you think about the price tag. So he looked at it and it was $850. Now, that very morning, I had been complaining to old Nat Abel that I didn't have enough money to pay my electric bill. And my electric bill was like, I forget, you know, 125, whatever money. And this artwork was 850. And boy, I mean, I needed money like right now so I could pay my electric bill. So we're sitting there and he said, no, he said, I don't think I'd pay that much for it. How much would you pay for this? If I was, how much would you write a check for right now if I told you we made a deal? What would you pay for this work of art? And he actually sat there and he thought about it for a second. He said, well, I'd pay $650 for it. Now I'm telling you the truth and I mean it. That I says, is that an offer? And he looked at me and he thought for a second. And he said, yeah, that's an offer. Well, I sat down there and I didn't want to give in too quick, right? So I said, 650. Oh man, 650. Oh, geez. I said, I can't possibly sell it for that much. I said, I'll tell you what I'll do though. I'll split the difference with you. I want 850. You want 650. You make it $700 and we got a deal. What do you say? Would you write a check to me for $700 for that work of art? He thought for another day. Yeah, I'll write you a check for $700. My hands were shaking. My knees were shaking. Every inch of my body was shaking. And I got out a receipt and I got his name and his address and I wrote out a receipt, made a very, put the description and everything he needed to know about the artist and what the painting was and the title and all the stuff that I was trying to describe to him earlier when he first came in. I just wrote it all down on a piece of paper and I made it in the form of a paid receipt. And I turned around and I showed him the receipt. Now, I wrote down your name and your address and your phone number and the name of the work of art. Is this all what you are agreeing to buy? He said, yes. I said, write the check. He sat down and he wrote the check for $700. As soon as he was gone, I mean, the instant he left my place, I locked the doors. I turned off the lights and I ran up and I got my car and I drove home and I told my wife, we paid the electric bill. She said, we did. I said, yes, because she was worried like I was. Because I always never lied to her. If things were hard, I told her they were hard. If things were going well, I told her they were going well. And she knew I would tell the truth. I said, we made a sale and I told her $700. And so I said, I got so excited about it. I forgot to go by the electric company's office. Back in those days, you paid in cash or by check. And I said, but I have cash money. I went, I cashed the guy's check. I didn't wait for it to clear and I didn't wait for anything. I just cashed the check and we're good, right? So she got all excited. I was all excited. We, I went down. I said, get in the car. Let's go down. Let's have the pleasure of writing this, paying this bill. And you'd have thought that we'd have struck the lottery because here we were excited about paying $125 electric bill. And she was so excited and she could see that what we were doing had some value. Let's put it that way. And so we went down together. We paid the electric bill. I had already paid a couple of other bills, so we had a little money left over. I said, my goodness. She says, what now? I says, I am so happy. How about if I buy you dinner at a place other than McDonald's or Burger King? She said, really? I said, boy, you betcha. She said, okay, let's go. So after paying the electric bill, I took her out to it wasn't, believe me, it wasn't the fanciest restaurant in town, but it was a decent, nice family restaurant, like a Denny's or something, I don't know. And it wasn't a Sunday buffet either. It was a sit down restaurant. Anyway, I hope you get my point. What was my point? Oh yeah, the time. What's your time worth? What is your time worth? This little story tells you one thing, and that is that everything is worth something to somebody. And if you are an artist, now I am going to assume that you are doing the very best that you possibly can, and you're putting effort, serious, heartfelt effort into every single work of art that you make. I'm assuming that. Because if you want to make a living as an artist, you had better be putting everything you have into every work of art. Because of the fact that there's so many artists out there, all of them trying to make a living, and they're all in competition, and they're all trying to see what their work of art is worth and what people are willing to pay for their work of art. So what I'm saying is don't do repetitive, half-assed work that anybody could do, that a monkey could do. Do good quality work. And if you do, I am going to promise you, if you're consistent and you put in the time, remember the time, that your work will eventually get to the place where people will anticipate buying it and they will find you out and they will start buying your work for a ever increasing price, because the more confident you become in pricing your work, and every time you price a work of art, you're making a declaration. My work is worth this amount of money. And the more you sell, it confirms the fact that your work is worth this amount of money. Now you have to figure out, what about the time factor? I'm glad you asked. The time factor is this. When I began doing all this for my own work, as I mentioned before, I made a determination of what my monthly nut was. What do I need to make every month in order to pay the bills? And in the mid 1980s, my nut was $1,200 a month is what I needed to pay and here's what I came up with. My nut to crack was $1,200 a month. Now I made a serious sit down with myself, a discussion with myself to determine what can I realistically expect to sell my works of art for. And boy, you better be getting brutal with yourself, because if you live in a fairyland, you're going to fall flat on your face. I sat down and I said, well, I had sold several works, and I was, honestly, I'm not trying to brag. I'm a good painter. I was good then, and I, I, I can't paint anymore because of physical issues. But I was good enough that I could confidently say that I could sell my artwork for beginning at around $200. If I needed $1,200 a month to pay my bills, that means that I needed to sell 6 paintings a month. That if I could average $200 per painting, and if I could make, realistically, sell 6 paintings a month, then how much time would I have to spend in order to spend so many hours painting that I could sit down and expect to finish the work and sell 6 of these a month for an average of $200 and make that goal of $1,200 a month. And it all boiled down to how much time did I need to spend doing my craft, my artwork, to sell 6 paintings a month for $200. How many hours do I have to spend? Blah, blah, blah. And it all boiled down to, if I spent an average of, I think, 6 to 8 hours a day painting, that at 6 to 8 hours a day, I could make 6 paintings a month that I could sell for X number of dollars. And that when I made that number of sales every month, if I spent that much time, remember the time, making the artwork, that I could make a living and pay my $1,200 a month target for my bills every single month if I stuck to it, if I did it that way. Now, here comes the big one, discipline. You must have discipline if you're going to make a living as an artist. There is no other way about it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. You cannot guess. You cannot paint when you feel like it. You cannot paint on the days when it's cloudy or days when it's sunny and all like that. You must set a discipline, a daily discipline, month after month, day after day, year after year. Set that discipline for yourself so that it becomes a habit. And listen, there's been plenty of times in my life when I did not feel like going into the studio and painting one more painting. I just didn't always feel like it. But I disciplined myself to the point where whether I felt like it or didn't feel like it, whether I had any what you call inspiration or not, I didn't care. I was in there in my studio with something in my hand to start working and believing that at the end of the day, I would have at least a start on something that would be have a make a dent in my $1,200 a month target that I needed to pay my bills. Okay, then I started exercising the plan. I started actually working so many hours a day. I could make so many paintings that each painting I could sell for so much money, and that if I sold worth this many hours, that I would make this much money because I was disciplined to uh, create enough artwork to pay the bills to get my $1,200 a month that I needed to pay my basic bills. And I doubled that number of hours. And you would be astounded, stunned at how accurately and how exactly and how precisely that formula worked every single month. Now, when I quit my job working construction, I told the guy, I said, if you want a 2 weeks notice, I'll give you a 2 weeks notice. But frankly, I want to quit right now and start working. I told him what I was doing. He said, goodbye. And I was out of a job. I mean, whoa, out of a job. Whoa, out of a job. But from the day I started working, my income tripled. Listen to me, I'm not telling you a joke. My income tripled the very first month, and it continued in that degree for all year long. And then I began to adjust and began to take steps for marketing and other things. And I'll tell you about those another time. But over time, I began making a very good living doing the kind of artwork that I do. I'll put a couple of pictures up of my artwork so you can see. But this is a true story, my friends, a true story on how one person, all you got to do is just take that one step and say, I believe that I can do this. And that if I believe I can do this, then I'm willing to discipline myself to the point where I can start making a living and disciplining myself to do this every single day. You can't guess it. You can't, well, I'll try kind of thing. You can't do that. It, listen, it just won't work. It won't work because that's not a commitment. You have to make a commitment to do all this. And if you commit to do it and commit to spend your time doing what you love to do, Because look at the alternative. Seriously, you're going to spend 8, 9, 10 hours a day working at something. And statistics and polls and people that specialize in these things have drawn conclusions that somewhere like 85 or 90% of the people that work in the workplace hate their jobs. Hate their jobs. And just settle in on that for a minute. And you might be one of them. You might be doing something that you just hate doing. You hate getting up in the morning. You hate facing the prospect of driving into town or wherever it is that you work. You hate the prospect of lifting that shovel one more time. You hate the prospect of going one more time and doing what the boss tells you to do. People don't like 85, 90% of the people don't like the kind of work that they're doing. And usually it boils down to the fact that they're not doing what they're called to do. Artist is a very special calling. If you think you've been called to be an artist, you are very special in a very small category of people. Because being an artist is these days people ask me what I do. I tell them I'm an artist. I say it with pride. I'm an artist. I make my living. They used to say, no, what do you make your living at? And when I told them I make my living painting, they're astounded by that. What do you mean you make your living painting? What I mean is I make my living painting paintings. That's how I make my money. And you can just see a certain vibe of respect begin to flood the place. People respect somebody that's willing to stand up and do what they really want to do in life. And all I can say is do what you love to do. And don't let somebody tell you that your work is worth $7 an hour, these days $15 an hour. Who in the world can pay their bills on $15 an hour? Seriously. Who can pay their bills on that kind of money? Your time is worth something. And you are the only one that can make the determination of what that something is. Think on these things that I'm saying. I know it works because I have done it personally. I know it works because in my life, I now pay a lot of bills. And I now retire, a comfortable retirement, simply because I have done the work of my own hands. So, just take this as an admonition. I make these videos because I want you to do well. I want you to make your own way in the marketplace. I want your bills to be paid. And the best way to do it is do what you love to do. I have other videos coming up. I'm sorry it's been a long time between this one and the last one. But I do have some videos coming up that I'm very excited about. And all I ask is that you stay alert, stay tuned, and always be alert for those possibilities, those opportunities that are bound to come your way. And set your heart like flintstone that you are going to do what it takes to fulfill the calling in your life. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking it if you like it. And we'll see you the next time. Goodbye.